Welcome to We Are Women, Unapologetically, the podcast that talks about the good, bad, ugly, and awesome. Careers, life transitions, confidence, and everything in between. Because shift happens, but you don't have to do it alone.
Hello, and welcome to We Are Women Unapologetically. Today, I am accompanied by Chris Coladonato. She is a speaker and coach helping busy humans rethink what it means to reset and actually make space for it in their daily lives. A former relentless achiever and go-to person for everyone else, she now helps others do what she finally learned to do: choose themselves. She recently launched her first coloring book, Color Me Unplugged, a creative invitation to slow down, unplug, and reconnect with yourself through mindful coloring. Chris, thank you so much and welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Can you tell me how you got from being this overachiever, the go-to person, to where you are now and what you're doing?
You know, I don't know how it happens for anybody else, but it's one of those traps you just fall into. You know, you're doing everything and you keep getting rewarded for it. You get raises and promotions, and I just kept doing and doing and doing. And I got to a point where I couldn't do it anymore. And it's so funny. Somebody had asked me, how did I know I was in burnout? And I told them I never knew I was in burnout.
Yes.
I didn't know until afterwards when I started doing this work. So what happened is I ended up leaving my corporate gig earlier than intended, probably 3 years earlier than I intended. I always wanted to pivot and do something for myself, but the pressure and the stress and the relentless doing, I just couldn't do it anymore. And I kept moving my date up, further and further and further. And I said, I've got to leave. And I took probably 6 months or so off to just de-stress. And it was then that I realized, oh, I think I was going through burnout. And, hindsight is 2020. When I realized I was going through burnout, or I had gone through burnout, and I was starting to readjust my life and really think about, what do I want to do? And how do I want to show up in my life? Couple that with a breast cancer diagnosis that happened 6 months after that, made me go, how I'm living my life now is not how I want to live it for the rest of my life, however long that may be. And I'm all healed, cured, 2 years cancer-free. It was just a wake-up call between the burnout to who am I? What do I want to do now that I'm no longer busy? I mean, I didn't even know who I was. And I think that was part of it. I was keeping myself busy for so many years because I didn't know who I was. I didn't even know if I would like myself. So I left corporate life in 2022. And I honestly can say that it probably took me to the end of last year, at the beginning of this year, to really get it and really start living this life that I help other people live. I'm finally living a life that I like. And for the first time in my life, I can honestly say I love myself, which sounds odd for some people, but I know a lot of people, and probably a lot of people listening, get that. And, I've said it before, I love myself, but I never meant it. But now I'm like, yeah, no, I really do.
That's really powerful because there are so many people out there that they say, I love myself, and they truly do not mean it. When you started changing things in your life, what was that realization like?
It was a slow excavation. So I had engaged with a coach and probably spent 2 years doing this excavation to really start to understand, who am I and what is it I want? And what are those voices in my head? Are they my voice? And realizing how often those were not my voices. Those negative spirals, I can't believe you're doing this again, what I used to call angsty journaling, none of that was my voice. And that probably took me about 2 years of self-discovery, of deep, deep inner work that for the first time in my life, I really cried I was always prided myself in being able to keep my emotions in check. And now I'm just like, okay, whatever. The emotions are not in check. And there was just so many aha. It was like little light bulb after little light bulbs. One day I decided to wake up and dye my hair purple because I had always wanted to do it for like 20 years, but I always made excuses. I got 2 tattoos and there's more on the way, but I had wanted them for years, probably for 20 years. And I always had the excuse. I don't know what I want. What will people think? So it was just all these little things starting to show up, adding color to my background. I love colors. And it was just little bit by little bit that one day I woke up and I was like, oh, I really dig this. I dig me. I dig all the things that I love to do. And it's honestly what also led to the coloring book, which was I'm just doing something I love.
I have seen some of the pages of it and it looks absolutely amazing. I'm curious, are you an avid colorer or were you before?
Yeah. Yeah. So coloring, I probably started coloring in 2015, so probably about 10 years ago, as a way to, and I'm looking up at my coloring books. I keep them close by. So in between meetings, it was like my go-to reset, instead of he'd get out of a project meeting and it was just like, whoa, and I've got 50,000 emails that are waiting for me, but I need a break. I need a minute. So I would just turn to coloring and I would start coloring. And it also helped me during meetings too. I know a lot of people doodle, but what helped me was to actually color during meetings. So I had always loved to color. Creating a coloring book was not on my dance card in any way, shape, or form. I have all these photos that I've been taking in nature because I do forest bathing with clients. And I take a ton of photos and I love them all. And I wanted to do something with them other than just use them in social media. And then go down a YouTube rabbit hole and see, oh, there's a way that you can kind of start to trace them and turn them into patterns. One thing led to another, and now I have a coloring book.
You say that it's something that can help you in meetings.
Yeah.
Can you expand upon that?
Yeah.
I know that I have been a doodler. I know so many people that are.
Yeah, it's a focus tool, and that's what doodling does too. It's why they recommend handwriting notes. It's a memory tool, but it's also a focus tool. So what it allows you to do is stop any of the spirals of the thoughts. And I would either be thinking of a response to something someone would say, or thinking, that's never going to work, or jumping ahead 5 things, or trying to figure out what I'm going to make for dinner. So coloring allowed me to, oh, brain, why don't you focus on this? You just color. And it allowed me to start to settle all the chatter that was in the head and allow me to hear. It's also why, in Zoom meetings or anything like that, you want to turn off self-view so that way you're not looking at yourself. But even just looking down and doodling allows you to focus more on what's being said versus having to think of all of those things. So it helped me to calm down, honestly, a little bit. And what's really cool is I was just talking to a friend who happened to be using it, and she was saying the same thing, where she just happened to pull it out when her emotions were just overflowing. And the act of coloring started to calm her down because, again, it's just giving your brain something to focus on. It's like, okay, you're safe. It's okay. You're just here. You're just coloring. So that's how it helped me. And it's how I usually recommend it for others. It gives them just something to focus on so they don't have to have all the thoughts swirling around in the head.
You mentioned that you started doing this in 2015. So were you doing this when you were in corporate? Or was this just something you did in your free time? In meetings during your corporate time?
I did. And I would tell people, I'd be like, you know what? If you see me heads down, I'm listening, but I'm coloring because it helps me to focus. And sometimes I was taking notes, sometimes I was coloring. And, I would get some odd looks from time to time, but then people, honestly, they're like, wait a minute, are you taking notes or are you coloring? And I'm like, does it matter? My work speaks for itself. Then it just became a thing I did, and then other people started doing too. So yes, I was completely doing this during corporate.
Did you have people that would question not what you're doing, but why you're doing it and you felt yourself having to explain yourself?
I think I'm laughing because I'm like, I think looking back, I just said, no, this is just what I do.
You own
Yeah,
it.
I owned it. And it's really interesting you bringing that up because how I was in corporate, I was so much more sure of myself than when I left corporate. It was almost like I had this corporate persona and she rocked. And as I wore this corporate persona, yeah, she owned a lot of things. And one of those things was coloring. I didn't apologize for it at all. It was just what I did. And it's really interesting you brought that up because it just made me think about when I took that persona off, I didn't know who I was.
And that's where I want to go next. Because
Sure.
I know that so many high achieving professionals go through that.
Yeah.
And it doesn't even have to be a corporate title. It could just be not being a wife anymore, not being a husband anymore, not being a parent that your children are relying on. When you take those titles off, it is scary and it is the unknown. I call it the in-between.
Yeah.
Can you tell me a little bit about your in-between and how that transition really felt for you?
Kind of laughing because I was just a hot mess. I mean, there was just no other way to describe it. And I'm also laughing because I was in this program with a couple women. We were always talking about the chrysalis, where the caterpillar just becomes all of this goo before he becomes a butterfly. And I was in that goo state for probably 2.5 years. And, I was writing something either yesterday or this morning where I was talking about busyness. And I wore my busyness like a badge of honor because I was validated, like, see me, look at what I'm doing, because I was rewarded, I was praised. But I also wore it as a security blanket because once I took that off, once I took that corporate persona off, I didn't know if I was going to like that person inside because I didn't know that person. I had been in corporate in some way, shape, or form since 1990. And in that, 15 years, the last stint I did, I was, as I like to call her, Corporate Chris. Her name is Callie. I have many personas that live in my head. I loved Callie. She rocked. She was great at what she did, and she was well respected, and she was liked, and then she was gone. She was gone, and I had my armor up even after I left corporate for a good, probably year. Like, I was in a program trying to work on myself while still having armor up, and not pretending to be something else, but not really being open and vulnerable with others or with myself. I would journal and I had great insights and things, but I never trusted myself because I didn't know this person that I was becoming because I wasn't really that person yet. So it was scary because I thought, I'm broken. Everybody else has it figured out except for me. And now I don't have corporate Chris to fall back on. Callie, who am I? What do I have to offer the world? And have her start her own business. That. Because now it's me. All me. Just me. And yeah, it was gooey, scary, dark at times, and very roller coastery. I would go up and down and up and down. Oh, I have found it. Oh, no, I haven't. Oh, I found it. This is who I am. No, I'm not. So it was almost like I was going into a dressing room and trying on different personas. And until I found that right one. And it wasn't until I was able to walk out of the dressing room wearing me, tattoos, purple hair, and just being really open and honest and saying, I don't know. I don't know if I like me, but I know I want to figure it out. Messy. That's the biggest word I can say. It was a messy, messy time. It still is. But I'm not the hot mess that I was 6 months ago.
I'm so glad that you are willing to admit that, because there are so many people out there that they don't want to admit that messy middle that happens. And we all go through it. And it's interesting because you talk about the hair and the tattoos, and I've never shared this on my podcast before, but I remember there was a time 6 to 8 months before I had my divorce from corporate, and I had walked into a room, and one of the VPs that I know well, trust, respect, she made a comment to me. She's like, "What are all these tattoos that I'm seeing?" Now, at that point, she was just seeing some of the tattoos like I have down around my ankles and things like that. So I remember taking off my sweater. I said, "I've had those for years." I said, "You haven't even seen this one." And she had no idea that I had this whole tattoo. Um, and her jaw just dropped. But just like you, I had that persona at work. They knew I was the one to get things done. They knew that it was very professional. It was not talking a whole lot about personal things. It was not showing the tattoos. It was about covering them up. I know there's a lot of people out there. They're afraid to show the tattoos. They're afraid to color their hair. They are afraid to wear the clothes that make them feel the most confident because of everyone else. Looking back now at corporate Chris or Callie, what would you tell her?
I would tell her she's not broken. Everybody else doesn't have it all figured out. She should do what makes her happy, not what she thinks she's supposed to do.
That just gave me chills. Is there anything else that you would tell her?
It's a great question. There's probably so much. I would love to sit down with her. I have a very vivid imagination, so you're going to have to roll with me a little bit here. We would go out into a forest, and I'd love to sit down with her next to my favorite river and sit on a rock, take our shoes off, put our feet in the river, and just be quiet for a while and do nothing. Because I remember always wanting to, and I always said, I wish the world would just stop for a moment so I could just take a beat. And I'd want to give her that chance to have a moment where she's not behind. If we could just magically put this bubble around us and the whole world pauses and we can all catch our breath. But to help her to see that the voices that she's hearing may or may not be her own, but to know that she is enough, she is loved, she matters, and just take one step at a time. Because I always felt like I was trying to go leaps and bounds. And I always felt like I was in this very rushed state, like I couldn't catch my breath because I was just doing all the things. And I didn't even think twice about it. Like I never sat and examined any of this until it got to the point where I was like, whoa, I've got to go. Because I'm crying in the bathroom. I am the woman who does not cry. I mean, I even remember saying in meetings, somebody had teared up at something. And we were just talking, and I wasn't upset at them or anything. And I don't know how the conversation came to be, but I remember saying, I'm so tired of people thinking I'm not compassionate. And they're like, no, we just don't think that. You just don't show emotions. And I'm like, that's just who I am. But I look back now, yeah, I didn't feel safe enough, but I didn't know any of this. I just thought I was broken, or I just thought this is what you do, because these were all the stories I was told as a kid. And I didn't know any of it when I was in the thick of it. And that's the hardest part. So that's why I would want to take corporate Chris and take her aside and just pause the world and give her this view of her that she's never seen. Because I couldn't see any of that because I was in the swirl. That, I think, is the toughest thing at all. And I think that's why we just get so caught up in all the things. And we start listening to that voice. I mean, so I'm sorry, I'm going to offend some people here, but I burned my journals. I know the journaling I did back in 2015 was what I call angsty. Like, I didn't even have dreams. Like, I was like, I don't know what I want to do. Oh, I got a promotion. Great. I'll take that. It sounded kind of cool. I mean, I did some great work. I'm not saying I didn't. I loved what I did. But I didn't know who I was because I was so caught up in all the things, and I never felt like I could slow down. Not because anybody was telling me I couldn't slow down. I was telling me with all the stories. So that's what I would want to tell. I'd want to give her that moment to just stop and almost have that. I think of Wicked with the bubble and Glinda, but the bubble would show her in a way she's never seen herself before. She would actually see people complimenting her and feel it. I was always like, oh yeah, that's just my job. That's just what I do. And I look back at that. We didn't know we mattered. We just kept on doing. So that's what I would want. I would want to just show her all those instances where she didn't see herself for who she really was. Strong, capable, loving, compassionate, giving, caring, fun, playful, enough, loved, lovable. That's what I would want for her.
When it came to your decision to leave corporate, and you mentioned that you had left corporate 3 years earlier than you had anticipated originally. Yeah. You said that things had started building up. You didn't realize it was burnout. Can you explain what you noticed after as the signs of burnout that you didn't recognize as you were going through it?
So the crying was a big one. I knew something was wrong when I started crying because I was not a crier at all. I mean, sure, a good Hallmark movie or a good commercial, Clydesdales, yes. But at work, no, I wasn't a crier. And when I could feel it coming on, I was like, something's just not right. So that was one sign. Part of the work I did was helping virtual employees connect. I was always connected, meaning I was always on a Slack channel or a WebEx channel or a Teams channel or teaching people how to be connected in communities or online. So I was always connected. And I look back now, and that hyper-connectedness led to some of the burnout. Because I was teaching people that I was always on and always available. So they always knew they could get an instant answer from me. But that hyper-connectedness and the angsty feeling where how anxious I was in the morning with emails. So many times we open our email and we're so anxious. Take that and multiply it by like 1,000. And somebody had said, is it a bear or an email? Because that's how we think about it. You know, we open our emails out and we're like, crap, I don't know what's going to come at me. And I was working on some really big projects that I had no idea what was going to come in my email. You can just feel that tension and that anxiety, almost like I couldn't catch a breath with email. Mm-hmm. It shouldn't be like that. It's not feeling like I could leave my phone and go on vacation, like I would take it with me. I mean, I was on some pretty high projects, but I could delegate. But I didn't feel like I could. Almost this anxiety of being disconnected, which again meant I was always connected, which meant the anxiety levels started going up higher and higher. And not being able to say no. That was another one. I just thought that's just what you did. And not being able to say no to work or being able to say, I'm at my limit. Mm-hmm. that was a sign looking back, but also not being able to set my own boundaries and honor my own boundaries. Saying I'm going to stop work at 4 and stop work at 4. So those are probably the things that stick out most in my mind looking back.
There are so many women that I have talked to, so many women that I have coached, so many women that I have heard from, and men. Burnout doesn't happen to a specific gender. It doesn't happen to a specific level, a specific color, race, religion, nothing. And this is why it's so important to talk about it. You said that you were not able to say no. Do you remember the moment where you finally found yourself enough to be able to say no for the first time?
Honestly, I think it's when I quit.
Mm-hmm.
Because I don't remember saying that before. I always took it on. It's just what I did. And, the hard part is when you're a high achiever, you're really good at juggling all the things.
Mm-hmm.
So to take on another plate, it's like, oh, watch me spin this. I got this.
Mm-hmm.
And then all the plates started falling. And not enough that anyone could notice. I still was giving like 150,000%, but enough that I could notice. And when I made the decision that this was going to be the date, and, my boss and I had been having conversations for a while, so she knew. She was completely aware that I was moving my date. She wasn't going to have me as long as she'd wanted. But I think one day she was like, you just have to decide. The day I made the decision, like, this is the day I'm leaving. Here's my formal resignation notice. That was probably the first time that I set a boundary and I honored it. And it was my form of saying, no, no more. Yeah. That was probably the first time.
You just mentioned what you knew was to carry all of the plates, to just take on more. Women in society are expected to carry it all. If you look back to, let's just say 50 years ago, you didn't have as many women in the workplace. You had women taking care of things at home. Now, looking to where we are today, there's a lot more women that are working, but they are still carrying the home as well.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't want to downplay this for any single parents out there, because I know absolutely they are doing it all, whether it's male or female. But for women, it has been a badge of honor to stay busy. It has been a badge of honor to say, yes, I can do it. What have you experienced in your own life that you can say the cost of carrying it all is not worth it?
I think for me, it was really interesting. I was talking about this with someone, and I was looking back through my list of books I had purchased. And I had purchased a book on burnout in 2018.
Wow.
Clearly, I knew something was going on. And I had started working with a coach in 2016. And some of the things that we had talked about, she's like, what is it that you really want? And I'm like, I want to be living the life that I can see. I want to be laughing. I make it sound like everything was horrible, and it wasn't. I had a really great career and a really great life, but it felt unfulfilled. And that to me was the cost, because the longer I kept spinning the plates and doing all the things, I never took time to really figure out who I was and what I wanted, and to be able to do that. And it's not regret, but it was that cancer scare that I was like, is this the end? Is this my end? Is this the story I want to end on? And I knew, I'm like, nope, no, 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 no. So the cost for me was a life unrealized because I never stopped. I never stopped to really get to know myself. And I could see these things like, I just want to feel so light and free. And I didn't feel light or free at all. But that's just what you did. You just kept on doing, kept on proving myself. Oh, I got a raise, I got a promotion. Great, I'll do more. But the cost was how many years, and again, it's not regret, but how many years did I waste not living fully? Like doing things like paint by numbers or going out on nature hikes in the middle of the day or stepping outside to listen to the rain, which is what I was doing this morning as it was pouring down rain. Getting a tattoo because I want to, because it's cool and I like it. Yeah, that's the cost. And it got to a point where I realized that cost was too high. And I think for me, it was the cancer scare that finally tipped it over, which made me realize if I don't change something now, tomorrow's not promised to any of us.
Yeah.
So what's the story? What do I want to be doing, living? Because it's not promised to us. So
You
yeah.
mentioned your cancer diagnosis came 6 months after you left.
It was a year after I left corporate, but 6 months after I started really doing some deep inner work on myself. So it was May of 2023, and I left corporate in April of 2022.
Okay. So you went from doing everything for everyone else to not knowing who you are to essentially not knowing how long you had to live.
Yeah, messy. Really, really,
Wow.
really messy. Yeah, messy. It literally was. I was goo. I was just, oh, in the thick of it. And you couple on that having to ask people, not for help, but be open and vulnerable. So part of my armor was I didn't let people get too close. And I mean, I had friends and always have been a very giving person. Thought I was a loving person, and I was, but I couldn't give that much because I didn't know what love was. But I remember as I was going through my cancer diagnosis, I felt more love than I have ever felt before. And it wasn't that people were loving me more. It was because I was receiving it more. Because I finally felt that I was worthy of love. So it wasn't a bad thing. Probably accelerated a lot of the work that I was doing. I'm not saying that everyone should go through that. But yeah, it made me able to receive love because I was finally starting to love myself.
That's a really important message because there are so many people out there that are going through the messy middle. As you were going through the messy middle and you were receiving this love, was there still thoughts of anger or resentment for the cancer diagnosis itself?
I never felt angry or resentful of it at all. So it's a little bit weird about me. I did maybe the first day. I was like, why? Why? But I also felt like, oh, of course it's me. Because, that's just my life. But probably the second day after I got my diagnosis, I'd run to the forest. It's where I go. If I'm ever missing, just go to the forest. That's where I am. And I was listening to this podcast. I remember this woman sharing that the cancer was a part of her. And any hatred she had for that was a hatred for her. And it was something that made me just stop. And I was like, so she just worked on loving herself as much as she could and taking care of herself. And I know it's different for everybody. Everybody has a different approach, a different mindset. But for me, as soon as I heard that, I was like, oh, well, of course I don't want to hate. It happened. But that's me. That happened in my body. So that's my body. That something went wonky. Why would I hate that? Why would I be angry at that? Why would I resent that? And it just was the right message at the right time for me. So it helped me shift completely. That never did I ever feel angry or resentful, except for probably that first day or so.
Was your cancer diagnosis something that you had had in your family, genetics, or was this something that just came out of the blue?
No, I have a sister who had it at the same age and almost the same type. And my mother had had colon cancer. So I wasn't young. I mean, I was 54, 55. I've lost track. Well, I hit 50 and I don't count anymore.
That's okay.
It wasn't out of the blue. So there's three of us that had it in our family. And we have a large family, 6 kids, 2 parents. So there was 3 of us with cancer diagnoses. It was kind of one of the things that it was like, of course it would be me. And that was probably the first couple of days where I was like, oh, yeah, of course it would be me. I'd be the one who would get it out of our family because, hey, that's just me. I don't do things right. I get things wrong all the time. So when it happened, it was almost like, yep, I knew it. I knew it was going to happen. Not because of any genetics or anything. It was just more me being mean to myself and thinking that I would be the one in the family who should get it because, I'm just not good enough. So yeah, all that self-hatred talk. But once I heard that podcast, and again, it was like day or 2 afterwards, I was like, wow, perfect podcast at the perfect time for me. But that's my journey. Everybody's journey is different and everybody has their own way of looking at it. And I think that's the thing is everybody needs to look at it in a way that works for them. This worked for me. So they also had in our cancer wing, and when I would go get radiation, they had coloring pages on the walls. So the techs always knew where to find me because I would be on one of the walls coloring. And I only had to go through 19 days of radiation. And I was like, crap, I need to finish this. Can I come back and finish this if I don't get it finished by the time my treatments are done? Because I really want to finish this. So now that the coloring book's out, I'm making some coloring book pages and going to send them down so I can keep putting some up on the wall because I know how much I enjoyed it. But yeah, I really never felt resentful. I never used the word fight. I was never fighting cancer. But that's just my perspective. Everybody's is different. Everybody's journey is different. But it was that podcast, that one little conversation. It was maybe a 2-minute conversation on the podcast. Changed my whole perspective.
If anyone is out there that is listening that may have recently, or maybe not even so recently, gone through a similar diagnosis, whether it be breast cancer or any other type of cancer, what is something that you would encourage them to do, or what is one thing that you would tell them?
Ask for help and take the help. We were going to go meet the surgeon a couple days after the diagnosis to get the whole plan. And I grabbed the keys to drive. My husband's like, no, I'm driving. Good thing he drove because I was pretty much crying the entire way there. Ask for help and take the help. It is a marathon. It is not a sprint. It is not a cold that you get over right away. So it's hard, especially for people who are not used to asking for help. And especially for people who are not used to saying, I need help, it's hard for them to take help. Ask for it and accept it.
Chris, you have gone through a lot in the last few years. You have, like looking at this coming full circle, right? I mean, you went from burnout to deciding enough was enough, to having the diagnosis, to being in remission, now owning your own business and being a published author of a coloring book. For anyone that has been in any of these stages, looking at where you are now versus where you were just even a few years ago, what do you think is the one thing that really kept you going, even during that whole messy middle?
People around me, and not even my regular family and friends, but it was this group of women that I had surrounded myself with, that we were all going through our own versions of this GUI. And when I found that group of women and started really opening up and knowing that I could, they would be like, thank you for sharing, because now you've helped me. And knowing that we were all going through our own things, that it was that community. And a small group, just a couple of women. There was 4 of us. And going through that together with them, with the guidance of a coach. But really those women, these are women that I can call on a dime and just say, I can't believe this just happened, or in a good way, or in a like, oh my God, I can't believe this happened. I will always be able to call on them. So it's finding those people that you feel you don't have to wear any mask. And they'll love you even more when you don't wear the mask. That's what kept me going.
Sounds like you have your tribe of women.
Mm-hmm. That I do.
I'm curious to know, did you have a tribe of women like that when you were in corporate?
I had them, but I wasn't open enough to receive and really actually step into that tribe. So there was people that were there for me that now I have several tribes that I can be really open and honest with. And a lot of them were around during that corporate time. Not in the same organization, but different volunteer organizations I was a part of. And we have a different relationship now than we did then, because now I am more open and authentic and real. And I felt like I couldn't be then because they had it all together and I didn't. When in reality, nobody had it together. If I had taken some of the armor off and allowed myself to be more vulnerable with them, then I probably would have had more of a tribe then.
If anyone is out there in that similar situation, what would your words of encouragement be to help them really lean into their tribes and open up more?
It's finding those spaces, and sometimes it's starting with a small group, like one other person. Hey, can we have a conversation? And you start to get to know, based on what others are sharing, how safe you feel with them. And you're not opening up and sharing everything all in the first time, but starting to just open the door a little bit so you get comfortable with sharing more, and they'll share some more and you'll share some more. And then it slowly just becomes this closer, more symbiotic relationship. But it starts with a conversation, and it starts with leaving whatever thoughts behind. Like, they're going to think this is so stupid. I can't believe I'm saying this. Leaving all of that behind, or, still hearing it and continuing to share anyways. Just finding 1 or 2 people that you feel you've got a nice vibe with, and starting to have a conversation and share something small. See how it goes, and then share again.
This conversation has been everything that we have talked about. It's been real, it's been raw, it has been vulnerable. And so I definitely want to say thank you for trusting me in this space and to have this conversation, not only with me, but to hopefully encourage and educate the listeners and watchers out there. So thank you so much for that. I do want to ask you, is there anything else that you would like to share with our audience?
I think we have covered all the things. Yeah, I just, we've said this before, but I'll say it again. Life is messy. It just is. And there are times when it's going to be messier and gooier than others. That's just part of the process. That's just life.
Yeah,
It really is. So keep going. There is light amongst the darkness.
Chris, thank you so much for our conversation today. If any of the listeners or watchers would like to get in contact with you, what is the best way to find you and connect with you?
The best way is to head to my website, connectioncatalyst.com. And you can learn more about me, and there's links to be able to meet me on socials. I'm active a lot on Instagram because I'm just visual like that. So I'm also on Instagram at Chris Cola Unplugged.
Thank you so much. And so for all the listeners and watchers out there, if you are looking to do your own little reset, I do have the Clarity in 10. If you'd like to learn more, you can learn more about it in the show notes. And until next week, stay fierce, stay bold, but most importantly, stay unapologetically you.